reframes how you do a bar line. So this is very cool. This is a good group right here. Thank you, by the way, for the transparency piece. Yeah. You must know Stuart. That's what we got. Help crossing.
They don't help as soon as they get a picture. Yeah. Back in the main group. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, I got it. We have a woman at my work, she has this like mop thing she puts on her handle because it would drop so often. It like leaves a softer noise, so she stopped scaring people. I was like, yeah! How did that go?
There's a gun in the air.
Was it lit?
Oh, shoot the gun in the air.
Alright.
Wow.
Lots of good mixing and mingling happening, and I promise there's going to be lots of time to do that soon.
Back in the room. Back in the class. Come on.
Alright, so I hope you all found that breakout to be useful and beneficial. It looked really awesome. Some good conversations taking place. But before we continue on and sort of let you all roam free, I did want to open up the floor to some general Q&A. It's possible that you've already asked and got some answers on questions within your advocacy groups, but perhaps you have questions for other legislators in the room or just more general questions. We're certainly happy to take those now. And again, if you have any questions written down on your blue note cards, you can feel free to refer to those, or you can pass them up if you would prefer to do that. Again, whichever you are most comfortable with. But if not, feel free to just pop your hand up, and if necessary, Becca can sort of designate the flow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lynn, and then Noah.
At the end of our conversation over here, we were talking about there aren't enough people to do the weatherizing kinds of work.
Yeah.
So, those of us on the Energy Commission in Hartford here are working with Trailblazers. It's a group, it's a Vermont women's work program, and the point is to train women to do carpentry and weatherizing. And did Molly talk to you about that?
No, I'm very curious.
Oh, making connections.
So, yes, Chuck Fenton from Heartland brought the idea to Hartford, and we need $30,000 somehow. And we've talked to the select board, Mary. Mary's in favor,
Well,
no, Lanny. Lanny's in
in
favor.
favor of it, yeah.
Yeah.
What is also interesting is it will, because one of the biggest issues for women working in this type of situation is childcare, it would also pay for childcare. So that's a big help, a big boon to make this work.
Lynn, if folks wanted to learn more about the program, where would they go?
You could ask any of us on the Energy Commission.
Bingo.
What is the name of the program?
Trailblazers. And it's out of Vermont Works.
Yeah, Vermont Works for Women.
So actually, that's probably the place.
Yeah.
And we're looking for, Heartland seems to not be wanting to go forward as a group. So we're looking for other partners. Norwich.
Okay.
Who also, and we thought
Tell me more.
maybe if Ginevra?
Stop.
I've talked to Chuck.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we thought if we broke it down to 3 towns, maybe just 10,000 apiece would be much more
This is
raisable.
This is great.
And the women get a little pay, and plus the childcare.
Lynn, would you be willing when we wrap up, if folks wanted to talk to you about it, would you be willing to
Sure.
stick around for a little bit? Yeah.
Esme, are you comfortable talking about it?
Sure.
Okay, you got two. So Lynn brings up a really important point, which is workforce. If you have tried to get any kind of plumbing or electrical work done in the last few years, you know how difficult it is.
A long wait.
It is a long wait. And one of the issues that we're struggling with as a state is workforce on every level. The extreme situation for contractors is impacting our access to climate goals. So I really appreciate the work of Vermont Works for Women, and I know the legislator invested quite a significant amount in trying to do technical programs that would support that. So great point, Lynn. Noah, you had a question.
Yes. What are y'all's plans in terms of electric vehicles, specifically trucks? Because a lot of folks in Vermont love their trucks. Unfortunately, they're also a big pollutant, so.
Noah, you bring up a great point. So if you're familiar with the recent vehicle purchase by our governor, he bought one of the all-electric trucks, and he wanted to get in that truck as soon as possible because he wanted to be a person who could show the value of being a truck driver and also having an electric vehicle. So I'm really actually buoyed by that because I think it's also a culture shift as well as things that we can incentivize. The Transportation Innovation Act from last session moved forward electric vehicle incentives that had a cap on the cost of a vehicle. So it was $45,000 and below you could get an incentive. The idea being that while we love a Tesla, we don't really want to pay for your Tesla. We don't want to pay for the extremely high-end vehicles. However, that leaves out some of those really large all-electric trucks. So we need to re-engage that conversation and see if there's a way that we can support utility vehicles. So if someone's using it for work or has a commercial fleet, how can we help Vermonters move their trucks to that? The other angle is not just electrification of vehicles, but also moving us away from miles traveled, so that you might still have your truck because you need to do your dump run, as we all do, but you will be more likely to bike or walk or take a public form of transportation when you can. So we need to incentivize all those other areas of transportation as well, because we're not just going to car our way or truck our way out of climate change. It's also about getting back to walkable downtowns and other forms of non-fossil fuel driven transportation. So, go ahead.
So I've kind of got a grand overview question. I think we're sort of, the UN has told us we got about 7 years, and then we've gone over some thresholds that we'll probably never return from. And I'm wondering whether the actions that we're taking is being measured against those goals. Are they gonna get us there?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, the Paris Climate Accord we re-entered. So, and Vermont had said that we would not leave the Paris, we would try to meet the Paris Climate Accord goals even if we weren't in it as a country. So I do think that we're trying to track along those goals. Your
But is it being tracked? Is someone putting up a cheat sheet saying, yeah, this is doing it?
So we have the Climate Council's Climate Action Plan goals, and we also have something called the EAN, the Energy Action Network is actually what I refer to more often because it's locally based, and they do a report every year. And they track how we're doing in relation to our emissions goals for 2050. Might be 2030 actually. I can picture, I get it, it's 2030. I can picture my paper copy that I get every year. Do you want to respond to that, or are you asking another question?
I do, because the EAN, we were just talking in our breakout group about the miscounting of emissions in the electricity sector. So if we're going to be using, we're going to be using measurements, we need to make sure they're accurate. And Vermont, what Vermont is measuring itself against right now isn't accurate. So we need to really count the greenhouse gas emissions that we're producing.
Yeah, could you, Senator McCormick?
No, finish with
Oh,
it. and
did
then
you,
I'll say.
do you want to elucidate a little bit more on that for folks who aren't familiar?
Yeah, so right now we're not counting emissions from Hydro-Quebec, and emissions from out of state. Our renewable energy standard includes the use of renewable energy credits that basically paper over, that are calling things renewable that aren't, or low emissions that aren't. In the clean heat standard that was proposed last year, biofuels would have been incorporated, and we know biofuels have huge carbon emissions, and we wouldn't have been counting that. So I think we need transparency in our energy policy.
Thank you.
And the numbers that we use to measure against our progress.
Good point. Senator McCormick, did you
Yeah.
want?
I would answer that we are not responding to reality. We are not. The legislature is made up of a wide range of opinions. And what the legislature actually achieves is a kind of amalgam of those different opinions, which means by definition it's watered down. And it's very watered down. I was talking with this group, I serve on the Senate Natural Resources, meaning that I was close to voting against the clean heat bill just because it was so weak. And then my sense was, well, it's the best we could do, it's a collaborative body, I fought the good fight. Now at the end, we pass a bill.
Campbell's nose under the tent.
Well, hopefully. But in any case, to answer the question, no, we are not actually realistically responding to the reality.
That's what I was afraid of.
Bob, did you want to add?
I went on the tour with Senator Chris Pearson and Representative Sarah Copeland-Hansis, who is now our Secretary of State-elect. And one of the questions that they did on the Climate Solutions Caucus tour was, or the question that kept coming up was, are you sure you're being bold enough? Which is reflected right here with Henry's question. So it came up at every meeting we went to, and multiple times. And then the other question that I wanted to ask actually was, the legislative session starts January something, 4th.
Not that we're counting.
Right, I'm glad you are. What I'm curious about is another question that kept coming up at these meetings. I love the fact that we're all here, but on January 5th, how are we gonna sort of be engaged with what's happening in the State House and what's going on related to climate-related issues?
Bob, well done. That is the perfect question. Jordan, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about some of the work you did with the campaign and collecting information to give information out to people, and then I can talk a little bit about behind the scenes.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would love to talk about the VPIRG Summer Canvas because that was a huge initiative that took place over the course of this past summer. Canvassers went out and they knocked on about 65,000 doors, right, Tom? About 65,000? Yeah, crazy amount. We've hit nearly every town in the entire state talking about the campaign, why it's important, and particularly why it's important to vote for climate and specifically climate champions. So we worked really hard to knock those doors and to sort of create that engagement with folks. And to collect information, of course, so we could follow up with them in advance of the election and make sure they knew that they were going to go out to vote, they had a plan to vote, they knew who they could possibly vote for, the folks who were really strong on climate, and just really fostering that connection all throughout the entire way, up until the point where they actually cast their ballots. And then, of course, this is sort of the post-election piece, right? We're having more conversations about climate in the lead up to the legislative session. So really just having those targeted milestones throughout since last summer up until this point. I will also add that we did a voter registration series with young people all across the state, going to different college campuses, making sure they were registered to vote, knowing what was on the ballot, answering any questions that they had, and directing them to resources that might be useful for them. So that's a bit about our campaign process.
And the reason I wanted Jordan to talk a little bit about that is who got an email from VPIRG or VNRC to be here tonight? Yeah, so as those continue to happen, you'll probably get legislative alerts.
Good.
And it's extremely helpful for me when I get a little note, even if it's not a long note, even a text message. For me, I'm cool with text messages during the session to say, hey, I'm watching this bill, I care about it. Oftentimes, we'll get 1 or 2 people reaching out to us, and that can sway a vote for certain legislators if they're hearing from just that small number of people. So you're going to hear continually from VPIRG and BNRC and the other climate organizations, especially if you gave your email tonight or were a part of the canvas over the summer. For the Climate Solutions Caucus, that's an organization of legislators, and we meet on a bi-monthly basis. So we actually have a Zoom that we do every other Thursday, and we're going to continue to send out our email newsletter that we do. And we have a few social media avenues if that's something you're interested in. But in general, I would say the best way to advocate as we go into the legislative session is to make a one-on-one connection with your elected official. If you're in Windsor County, that's me or Senator McCormick or Senator Allison Clarkson. If you're in Hartford, it's Esme and Coach. If you're in, and there's many other legislators who could be here tonight who also care about climate change. If you have any questions or you're not sure how to make that one-on-one connection, also feel free to reach out to the advocacy organizations here tonight who can help make that connection for you. But most of us love having that direct communication. And feel free at any point if you have questions, for example, and you're not sure what you feel about a bill, but you want to know more about it, we're also more than willing to share information as well. So, good question. And go ahead.
Community solar, why is it so hard? How are we getting it?
Such a good question. Do you want to talk about community solar at all? Okay. So I come from the community solar world wearing 2 hats, which is I used to work for a company that did community solar, SunCommon, and then now I am in the legislature. So what I see for the renewable energy standard is increasing how we can do community solar. For a lot of Vermonters, the issue is that you might not have a good space on your roof, you might have trees, you might not have land, but we still want to be able to have access to that generation. So community solar to me is when Vermonters can either buy in a co-op fashion or lease the ability to get the energy credits net metered to them at their home. That's how I think about community solar. Okay, so there's a few ways that we can incentivize it as a legislature, but looking at the renewable energy standard closely this session will be how we tackle that issue. And having a really hard conversation about net metering and the value of renewable energy that people are getting paid out for on their electric bill will be how we respond to growing more community solar. There was also a question that we got at another forum around current use and land management. So that's the other angle to community solar is typically it's in flat parcels of land or on roofs. So you want to make sure that we're looking at how our preservation is not directly defeating our ability to do renewable energy in places that Vermonters want to see it. So if you have a local town energy plan, for example, that's one key piece that you had to designate places that might be good for renewable energy. So I would take a look depending on, are you in Hartford?
No, I'm in Woodstock.
Okay, Woodstock also I believe has a town energy plan and you designated locations that are ideal for larger solar development. So supporting those locations is a good way to work at the local level too. Linda,
let's close it out with you, I think, and then we'll switch gears.
Okay, and I have a very practical question. How soon will everybody know their committee assignments?
Oh.
We've been promised earlier than usual.
We've been promised earlier than usual.
But that may or may not happen.
Yeah, hopefully January 6th. And then, Coach, I don't know, in the House, if there's any other information?
We just heard today, the surveys are continuing.
Okay.
And the speaker has requested our thoughts as to where we want to be. And this is the second round of surveys. And that was just this evening, the meeting I was at just now. So it's moving along. When you look at the 60 positions that changed this session. That's the biggest class, I think, you know, that in anybody's memory. So it's a pretty interesting process when you think about just, you know, how do you align, you know, those committees, those 11-person entities, and have it work effectively.
Of the 60 new, how many are women?
Oh, geez. It's predominantly, I'd say, women.
So hats off to Emerge, if I could just put in a plug for Emerge.
I'll take one other stab at answering that question. If folks are interested in following the committee process, in the House, it's all decided by the Speaker of the House, who will most likely be Jill Krawinski. I don't think that's a big, shocking, controversial announcement, that she will most likely be reelected to be House Speaker. In the Senate, it's a committee on committees. So that is comprised of the Senate Pro Tem, which will most likely be Senator Phil Baruth, the Lieutenant Governor, David Zuckerman, and then also someone elected to the Committee on Committees, who appears to be Dick Mazza. So if you are interested, the person you could talk to is our Lieutenant Governor, David Zuckerman. I would say he's probably the one person who's making any decisions, who is externally public-facing, who might be open to a conversation about climate change being important. So that's my only talking point on that, but well, thank you, Linda. Very good question.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you so much, all. And I feel like we've gotten a lot of really useful nuggets of wisdom and information from that Q&A, but I do want to wrap up with some other ways that you can get involved. At this time, Jane is going to come back around. She's got something else for you. It is our advocacy one-pager. So you'll find lots of different ways that you can get involved here within your community. It will have all of the contact information of the local legislators, and it will encourage you to ask those legislators kindly to please join the Climate Solutions Caucus if they are not already a part of that. And Becca, I know that you are heading that front. Is there anything you'd like to mention about that? It's okay if not to put you on the spot. No, all right, well, she's doing great work with the Climate Solutions Caucus. Yeah, getting it done. This is also a really great time to revisit that green note card that we talked about earlier. So that question is back up on the board. How will you advocate for climate action in 2023? That card is your ticket out of here, so you want to pull it out and give it to me. We won't let you leave. You cannot leave.
Help, I'm being held against my will.
And if you're feeling particularly bold, you can put your name and email address on that card, and I will follow up with you personally to see how you're doing with that goal.
Thank you.
And then finally, as we break here, we do have some resources back at that Keep Vermont Pool tent. We will be doing a raffle, so you want to sign the petition, and perhaps you will get Catherine Habo's latest novel. Ooh, really good.
Did everyone get one?
Sorry. No, you're good. Awesome. And if you are mixing and mingling, you'll also find some partners in the room. We have Vanessa from 350. We have Dan from, where is Dan? Dan right over here from Rights and Democracy. Lots of good folks floating around that we want to have conversations with. We are running a bit behind time, but I'm cool to stay here until we get kicked out. So take the next 15 or 20 minutes or so to have those conversations. And of course, stay tuned for additional events and opportunities. Big shout out to VFERG and VNRC for supporting this overall tour series. We're really thrilled with how this first event turned out.
Hartford.
Yeah, thank you, Hartford.
First one.
Yeah, we've got 11 more, so it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And of course, huge thank you to our legislators in the room. We know you have a lot going on and a direct conflict with this meeting. So thank you so much for being here. Our other partners in the room, and just all of you for coming out tonight and proving that climate is an important issue here in the
Thank you
minds
for
of
your
voters.
email tonight, because I didn't know about this and I wouldn't have come if I didn't get
Good,
the
There
email.
you
yes,
go.
the power of email.
Yeah,
Incredible.
absolutely.
Well,
Bravo.
thank you so much. Here is our contact information, but we're also going to be floating around, so feel free to have conversations with us and others, and if not, get home safe.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Jordan.
Thank you.